this
the
sort of like
rest of it.
alcohol and stimulant situation I have going on in my system is not exactly kicking in a way I expected it to. I feel like more low key than I feel like I was expecting more energy, and I'm not exactly getting that energy which I was kind of looking for.
You know what I think is in order is some literary chat to get that energy.
To absolutely, yeah.
Get that energy up.
To really pump me up. To give me
You
the
know what
pump
we
I'm looking
need
towards
is
some
a
great
self-effacing narrator right now to get us
and
totally slayful.
The first immediate thought I had when we started recording was, I do not remember this Asian woman's name.
Oh, I do. I have it.
Because it was something like really Thai.
It's today we will be discussing.
The story's called Bozo.
Bozo.
Which I thought was kind of a slayful title before I even started reading it. I was like, okay.
By
like written
Souvankham Thammavongsa. Oh, fuck. Souvankham.
Take a breath and proceed.
Thammavongsa.
We really don't mean to do this
kind of want to
whole
start
thing.
over.
We're just going to persist. If, listen, we do a very minimal preparation for this, and perhaps was an oversight that I immediately realized as we started recording was this woman has a very, even writing this tightrope has a very, I don't want to say ethnic or foreign, but has a name which is unfamiliar perhaps to the American English tongue, and that we should have taken a moment to, get the pronunciation out. But honestly, who's listening? About 4 people, perhaps. So, it is what it is truly. And ma'am, I wish I could say that, please accept my apology, as if I was not going to, tear this story apart moving forward. Because, I guess just spoiler alert, I was not a fan. Really? You liked it?
I actually did.
I thought it was fine. I thought it was absolutely fine, But let's get into our usual episode. Yeah. How are you feeling, Kelly? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling like the stimulants everything just
hitting
me
at you
all at once.
Incredible. And you know what? So last episode I got critique from my boyfriend, who was the first one to listen, and immediately told me I need to stop talking over you, mansplaining.
I'm tanking right now. Can we restart this whole thing?
No, we have to keep going. Come on, just get your bearings. Oh, fuck. Okay, wait, let's see. It's 11:59, and I think we've been going for about 5 minutes, so we'll stop at 12:40.
Okay.
So let's see. I guess let's start. So
I really do feel like I need to take it from the top. I'm so confused.
Wait, no, let's just. This is organic, Give me the vape. We can. So here, I'll pull it up on my phone as well. So
wait, can we actually start over?
I think this is good.
I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Well, let's take a little bit of a breath. I think okay. Shit. Okay, and all of my things are not loading. So perhaps. Well, okay. Listen. I feel like we don't need to start over. I feel like we're good.
Well, why don't we just start now and read it? We don't have to cut anything.
Oh, you're right.
We don't have to stop anything. Can we just
I thought you meant yes.
No, just give our little, more concise intro.
Yes, okay.
And then we can butcher the name still.
Now I'm confused. Wait, do you want to start over completely and just cut?
Or I feel like we totally derailed I kind of want to start, because remember we have all those questions to get to.
And we will. Let's just start. Okay, let's go to the story. Okay, so this is Bozo by Souvankham Thammavongsa. Thammavongsa. Okay, we can Thammavongsa.
Yes, Thammavongsa. Souvankham Thammavongsa.
So,
story Bozo. What we have here is a first person narrative, which I might point out does not start that way. It really kind of leads you to think.
That's true, actually. Yeah, that we're getting into third person kind of omniscient.
Right.
Actually,
So
it does start off in that way.
and I feel like maybe I've misled before we've gotten to the meat of the piece, so we
So
can save that
very
comment.
fiction workshop of you to make that particular critique.
To absolutely
not to name drop a certain someone, which we both have workshop experience with, but you know, so very MFA pill to sort of point that detail out.
Exactly. But what
I
we
think it's a little bit
largely
sloppy.
it is it's I couldn't tell if it was like, I think it's purposeful only because this narrator admits that she's writing stories about
Wait,
people.
where did she do that? Like, do you mean the
She says,
abstract?
I like kind of in the abstract, yeah, but I think
Yeah, and
she
it is
is
very
actually a
much-
writer.
And it is very much a, yeah, that could be true based on like the conversation they briefly have about occupations and what she says about herself. And yes, I
Right.
mean, to speak in terms of like larger themes of this piece, this is very much a story about making up stories about
Yes.
people.
Yes.
You know, about being the observer.
Right, exactly. And I mean, to that point, the sort of overall narrative we have here is a woman who is in her early 40s, who frequents a certain bar on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there's a really hot bartender.
I want to ask you, how were you picturing the bartender? Like, physically, what were you imagining when you think of hot bartender?
Well, it's funny because what I think of as hot bartender is in fact different from what I think this character thinks hot bartender is.
Oh, very.
In a slight way, whereas like I think this character thinks like Abercrombie model.
That's what I was thinking. I was
Getting,
thinking
like,
man
clean-
bun, blonde, cut
The
jaw.
Hawaii thing.
Yes, exactly.
A little
The Hawaii surfer
Maybe
thing.
Hollister is a more apt like.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean,
comparison.
he makes allusions to like wanting to go to the beach, so there's
Right,
that whole
he's like
thing.
a beach
And that's
bum.
exactly where my mind went immediately. but
Totally.
yours
But
took you somewhere different.
No, it took me there for the story, but if you said to me like right now, picture a hot bartender,
yeah.
that wouldn't be the guy
Mm.
because I feel like this bar is like, I'm like priced out of this bar likely.
Oh, you think so? I thought this was just like a neighborhood dive. I mean,
Oh, you think so?
because we know it's not
you're
New
right.
York.
You're right, it's not New York, and they are having shitty potato things.
Yes.
But I mean, I do feel like this is giving like a little bit like American sports bar and not necessarily dive. And so I think of like a dirty, like post, like pop punk, like bartender.
Interesting.
That's
very
like
Milwaukee.
That's hot bartender to me, like serving PBR or whatever. But anyway.
And then another question off of this. Were you imagining the narrator as Asian because it was written by an Asian woman? And are we to interpret this? I feel like this is a self-insert narrative. I feel like this is very much from the writer's perspective, but maybe I'm just saying that because she's a woman. But I was making the same assumptions about the last story we read about Zaki's neighbor's
that's true.
jaunt. Did that occur to you?
A really interesting, I mean, honestly, kind of like a bigger picture question. I'm trying to think of like, do I usually, and if I do or don't.
Imagine the narrator?
Yeah, like imagine. And I think I largely like don't have visual like imaginings of something that is so voice driven like
I
this.
don't either. And
so no, I don't think I did.
And I mean, this piece, and she also says in her interview, but I noticed this as I was reading it, like she makes a very conscious effort to not reveal very much about the narrator besides the monologue that she's giving essentially through telling this story. Like we don't get physical descriptions, we don't get really any details about her life.
Exactly, which is actually, I mean, shall we wrap up the plot? But I have a poignant note that I actually made while reading this regarding.
Thank you so much for being prepared. Well, I'm just fucked up because I read this maybe 20 minutes ago.
Same. Ignoring my little panic attack, my existential crisis. But like, no, I think to wrap up the plot, she has been, you know, kind of like
quick,
like ogling the hot bartender. She finally gets up the nerve and she's like creating these narratives in her mind about like what he does and like after work and all this stuff. And finally she's like, I'm gonna ask him out. And we learn likes to go to the aquarium, which is a place that she can think. So she asks him, will you go to the aquarium with me? Which, mind you, also we don't actually hear her say. We just have the
Yes.
reportage of what he
Of
says
what the
back,
report is,
which
yeah.
is, I don't think that's a good idea because I have a girlfriend. And then, that's kind of where the story hits its
Yeah, and then we
peak.
get like there's also a regular customer and he's like, yeah, I knew he had a girlfriend, because she's
Right, this
going
like
on about how
fat
like, well,
old
he didn't
man.
tell me. Yeah, it was like some old man at the bar who also is a regular. And then the old man is also like, and she comes here on Fridays too and sits
Right.
right there. And then, then she goes to the bar and sees the girlfriend. She's like, she's beautiful. And
Yeah, and just like me, but different.
yeah, and I listen, and she calls him Bozo, hence the title of the story. And then I realize that they're really serious. And then she like leaves the bar and like softly cries against the
Yes, and she
brick wall.
repeats Bozo to
Bozo.
herself
Yeah, and she says,
outside.
I wish I could have him in my mouth the way she does. And I was like, all right, well, there's the kind of sex I want from every New Yorker piece I read. But then I was thinking,
Truly
I if
protracted.
if I really got what I wanted out of this story, the second that the old man tells her that he knew that the bartender had a girlfriend, I was thinking like, okay, how would I finish this piece? And I was thinking, okay, I would have her start
Yeah.
masturbating right there at the bar for the old man. Like, just it snaps her, and she's like, I'm gonna start flicking my bean for this old man as the bartender watches. But again, perhaps that's why I do not have a story published in the New Yorker.
well,
and shit.
Oh, that's her last name.
Thammavongsa does.
Yes.
Okay. Now.
Yes.
Okay. So plot over.
No, I think that was, I actually kind of like your idea of her
Thank you.
flicking the bean at the end, because
I think that would take the story where it needed to go. And frankly, I was dissatisfied with the sort of soft domestic ending. But again, as we're establishing the more we're talking, like,
it is indeed the New Yorker.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they can't exactly, I guess, have cream pies and bean flicking.
But why not, though?
You know, like,
why
I mean,
not?
yeah, it's adults reading this magazine. Like, what, are the advertisers going to get so mad? You know,
I mean, probably. But that's like why I do feel that this piece, I thought it was actually something kind of maybe different in tonal qualities than the interview with the author leads me to believe, which is confusing and kind of puzzling to me, because where this piece really hits its stride is when it leans into this like self-effacing narrator. Like, we don't know anything about her. We just have her like internal thoughts. Like, we get to know her in that sense, but like she doesn't like have a body to us. And I was like, oh, it's really doing something interesting about like kind of the story that she's making up about herself at the same time.
That's true.
So these moments of kind of earnesty at the end, and I didn't even read them as earnest moments until I read the interview, and I was puzzled by that. Like, where the in the interview with the author, she's like, I thought it was very beautiful that the narrator becomes beautiful, and like essentially like she wants him to be happy.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that this narrator wants him to be happy.
No,
and
yeah,
that
she's
to me,
disgusted. She's angry, yeah.
That to me is far more interesting.
Saying that and like being like, oh, well, I guess they are happy. I'm gonna walk out the bar and softly cry against the exterior.
So I think that's really...
Yeah, it's sort of bizarre. And I guess, I don't know, it's like, me and you, I feel like we can always transpose interest onto something.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, I feel restrained to sort of say that this was kind of like a hack job, but like, if the intent was full earnestness with this, does it feel like a hack job to me? Like, I mean, certainly with all of these New Yorker stories, that like they are well written and sort of, a treat to read.
The prose
but, like,
is very nice.
Exactly, like the prose is nice. And I think for an internal monologue, it does well. There are some touch points where I feel content-wise where I was just like kind of like cringing out a little bit, not because anything was like egregiously tacky or tone deaf, but because it felt sort of like paint by numbers, like millennial emotional life. But like, it was just, it was fine to read. But do I feel discounted thinking about whether or not this is like an earnest emotional effort by this author, by this writer? I mean, I guess not. I mean, honestly, I mean, after reading this, I kind of had a sort of negative impression. I think I'm just sort of yapping right now, honestly.
No, like, I mean, it's interesting because I do think that the interview really does change the way I read this.
And I remember when I read the interview, 30 minutes ago, I felt the same way, but I literally can't recall a fucking thing about
That's
that
okay,
interview.
girl. That's why I'm here. Like,
all right, bring up some quotes.
okay. So one thing I thought that was interesting. I'm going to head to the interview and read what the author has said. No, I don't actually want the audio. I want the transcript of the interview. But she talks about the sort of ending and the narrators. Where the fuck is the interview? Oh,
Do you have
here.
a different tab?
Here. It's okay.
Here,
Open a
slide.
new tab. Okay. I'm boomer. So nope. Aha. The question is it's about the reversing the male gaze, which we can talk about. But
Yeah.
the author responds and says, when we are in the story, we realize it's the narrator who really is beautiful. She's just someone who wants to go to the aquarium. She could be angry with what's happened to her, but she imagines the narrowness of a man's circumstances. She cares if he's happy, and even if it turns out that he's not happy, she leaves that alone because that might be what he wants, to be unhappy. Because no one is going to come for your unhappiness. When she learns about his girlfriend, she doesn't do what we are socialized to do and imagine a rival or imagine something ugly for him. Instead, she sees his girlfriend as a woman just like her who wants good things for this man. I
guess I didn't necessarily get that from reading it.
I just think,
and I find it sort of a corny like sort of theme to transpose on your story.
Yeah, because I didn't see, and I get so here's the quote from the story.
Seem like she was particularly moved by the fact that like the girlfriend was actually beautiful and that he did have a life. It just, I don't know, it seemed like she was pissed off that she didn't get to boink.
Right, which I think would be really an interesting angle to explore here, like, because
go deep with
and to run with, because I mean the quote in the story, I mean, here's an abridged version, is women are for the most part good people, nice, and if they're not nice, people make them feel bad about it, so they have no choice but to learn how to be nice, attentive and caring, thoughtful, blah 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 blah. You don't even have to try very hard, just look clean and pretty. I wondered if he was happy. Being unhappy is comfortable. No one is going to come for your unhappiness, and really you don't have to do anything about it if you don't want to. So my question is, like, I don't see a reversal of like that sort of like desire to revel in unhappiness, and which also is interesting to me.
And also, I just feel like, you know, her intent here to make it a reversal of what we're like socialized to do, while cognitively that seems like kind of an interesting subversive thing to do, when you actually get down to the brass tacks of reading a story, like there's like no kind of dramatic tension there or like anything interesting to latch onto. Like, again, it's like you take your vape hit and you say, okay, and move on with your day. Like, yes, like congratulations to this woman for being this narrator for being so evolved and being so mature in her perspective on this man's life. But like, I don't know, that doesn't really give me like juice as a short story reader, you know? Like, I don't really care how mature and evolved this woman is, you know? I want her to be a cunt. I mean, like, you know, I'm reading a story, girl. Like, girl, I'm taking time out of my day. I don't necessarily need, you know, especially reading something fictional, to be like sort of in awe of like the moral and sort of ethical and cognitive superiority of the narrator. Like, I don't really care. I want her to flick her bean for the weird old man that's sitting next to her.
I think that's a good point, because it is this story is sort of building its crux on that sort of moral
that's not like
morality.
A shocking reversal to me either. That's not something that makes me like pause and ponder either. Like, it's just like, oh well, good for her, she seems well adjusted, I guess, you know.
No, but even
congrats, she took it in stride.
Right.
Like,
right. Even within the story itself, though, like there's no indication, like there's no indication for that move at the end towards the pandemic either.
Oh, that was another thing I wanted to bring up.
Is a strange pivot, just given that the story itself doesn't seem interested in morality. So then for it to end on a note of sort of moral triumph seems just tonally at odds with the first half of the piece.
And also,
which doesn't make sense. It would be more interesting if she flicked her bean.
You'd think that the through line would be like, not that she leaves and like cries and like imagines having him in her mouth the way his girlfriend would. It would be like, I don't know, like just, sort of off into the sunset and strutting forward.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Like,
It's
fuck
just,
this. I mean,
it's incongruent,
which
to
is
borrow a word
interesting. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is like it's a curated look at this scene through this character's specific psyche, we could say. Like, it's the first person is like her writing about it.
Even then,
but that makes even less sense to me
I know,
at
like,
the end.
it seems like not very intimate at all if we're getting a picture into this woman's interpretation of the events that are moving forward. Like
Right.
if we are doing first person, which it seems like, which by the way also pisses me off now that we've read 2 of these stories and they're both like first person narration, all the grief we hear about first person in our like workshop settings, it's like, well, it kind of seems like every contemporary writer is writing in first person.
And like there's an opportunity to do it really well.
I know, and this I don't think
didn't take the opportunity. So then it's like, I understand the critique if this is, the stuff that's out there, but it's like, not to say that this was over. I actually thought it was. I wish I hadn't read the interview, because without that, I think I would have found the ending. I wouldn't have noticed it to even hit on that like tonal level. Like,
I mean, overall, I thought the story was perfectly fine. I preferred last week's story, if we're going to keep running a ranking.
Yeah.
But, that was the other thing. I was completely imagining this like pre-pandemic, and it almost felt like kind of shocking and anachronistic, the inclusion of the pandemic.
It was.
And I guess I had to kind of, part of this I think is me having to like come to terms with the fact that like the pandemic is going to be something that's like referenced in like sort of millennial brain short fiction for like years to come, and like fiction in general. And I just find it kind of chuggy. Like, I think we should just like move on generally,
because it doesn't necessarily, for better or worse.
Didn't it feel cheap?
Yeah,
I was
feels
like, oh, we're gonna like.
It feels
I was
unearned.
Sort of shocked.
Yeah, it feels unearned, and sort of tossed in. And I can appreciate it if there's sort of like a cultural aspect, which I think it's striving for, like, to highlight like that people think about relationships differently post-pandemic could be interesting, but it's to me, I actually don't objectively find that super interesting. And the other thing is, this story it does not posit that at the beginning, so you need to, I think you need to hint at the inclusion of it earlier if you're gonna do it.
Like, talking about this now, it makes me think, like, I feel like, it loomed so large in our general just cultural consciousness that, like, I feel like everything that needed to be said about quarantine, about like the psyche of the pandemic and life post-pandemic, has like been said already in multiple tweets and TikToks and Instagram reels and conversations we've all had. Like, I don't think there's anything to explore. Like, there's not really fertile ground. It's been like kind of fucked to death by just general discourse.
I would also agree that actually the most interesting stuff to come out of the pandemic happened during the pandemic too.
Exactly.
Like, under those constraints, and now retroactively throwing it in is just sort of like a nod to like
weirdly like cheap.
And I will say too, I am actually kind of a fan of like post 9/11 fiction in a way that I think is completely different, because
9/11 always looms large in your mind.
It really does. I mean, yeah, some of my earliest images. Yeah,
just be fully 9/11 girl.
Yeah, I think I could definitely. I'm definitely gonna write a piece
personal
about
life.
It. Yeah,
just constantly talk about 9/11 with people.
I mean, yeah, I watched all the all the like online documentaries.
Did you ever watch the one about the woman who was like lying about surviving, and she would like go to a bunch of like survivor groups, and they like exposed her for like not being anywhere near?
Yes, I did. That one came out only a few years ago. I think Loose Change 9/11 is like the big like conspiracy ones about like the gunpowder and the steel. Not gun. Yeah, there was like traces of something explosive in the steel that was used to create these buildings.
About 9/11.
I think it's, well, I just think it's interesting, like the cultural shift that is not something that I think happened.
Do you think women care more about 9/11 because it's like
a
big plane ramming into
No, I
like
think
a big Arab-controlled plane, like ramming into like a sweet, innocent American.
But that's like the Bradley Cooper, like Stan, American Sniper Bradley Cooper.
Oh shit! I
like
actually
that's
never
their
saw
like
that
wet
movie.
dream.
Yeah.
So I feel like quite literally. I mean, we know some literature that's been basically wet dreams written about that. So it's like.
We can't help ourselves this episode.
I know, it's fine. Wait, speaking of, I have a question for you that I came up with while taking notes.
They're so
Have
dry for
you
these pretzel
ever
chips.
heard of a successful, you or anyone else, have you
Yeah.
ever heard of a successful customer service employee / regular, like cafe regular, restaurant regular relationship? Have you ever heard of this working out? And if so, what was the
Like
context?
specifically romantic?
I mean, I guess it could be sexual too, but like,
I guess
I do have a sexual one.
I mean, really the only, I mean, two things come to mind. Immediately when I worked at a restaurant, like my ex's restaurant, there was a, you know, a bar, and there was just this like freak dude who was like a divorcee who would like sit at the bar every single night and order the same thing and sort of chat all of our ears off.
Yeah.
And he was a pain in the ass, and everybody didn't like him because it would like, you know, make the closing very hard because he wouldn't like leave. And then he would ask for like a ride home, and he really like, you know, like assumed this kind of
harassing
strange
everyone.
intimacy. And everyone there was
How
just
old
sort
was
of like,
he?
he was old. He was like 50.
Yeah.
Or something
Yeah.
like that.
They
He
always
was
come
kind
to
of
those guys.
sexy. Like in retrospect, I thought he was kind of hot.
Silver fox.
But like I always just feel like in that sort of like regular customer interaction, like it's always like the employee who's like just weirded out and sort of like cringing for the whole thing, and just sort of like,
because you're at work.
Yeah,
like you're literally at work. Like, I mean,
and I mean, like, I would love for that sort of thing to work out. Like, you know, when I worked at King's Spa, when I was at the restaurant, you know, doing counter service, I would love if one of those regular customers, like, we would kiki. I would, like, in my head, I would love if that happened. It never did. Like, I would be fully down to, like, have a sexual relationship with a regular customer, but it just never works that way. It just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
Because the people who want to engage any customer service worker are fucked in the head.
They are fucked in the head. That's actually, I think, a good point. The only
they don't have anything else going on.
Right. Especially if one is a regular. I mean, I think being a regular somewhere is like kind of embarrassing as someone who's worked in the service industry.
Insane. Yeah.
And because like it's like, yeah, I know how much money you spend per month at this establishment because
and
you know, with technology these days, Square tells me I can like literally click one button and I know
really.
Yeah,
that's very embarrassing.
Totally. It's really embarrassing. It's like, okay, girl, you spent like $2,000 on bagels last month. Like,
it's really like
whatever.
Sad, actually.
No, but like I was gonna say, anecdotally, the only time I did carry on with a bartender, briefly for like a couple months.
Is that the one that fucked you?
I mean, they all fucked me.
Oh, but specifically, was this a different one than the dating app one?
Oh no, and so I was gonna say the caveat with this is that I did in the bar we like had like an exchange, but it's because we had just matched on Tinder.
Yeah, and I don't think that
and
counts.
So like while he was working, then looked at his phone, and then we were like, and he's like, did we just match on Tinder? And I was like, yeah. And
I mean, like, I'm sure some
it's like
beautiful, charismatic person has a story about how they were working as a bartender and you know, met the love of their life or met like the hottest, sexiest person and got fucked so hard. But like,
but for the most part,
for the average lay person, like it's just generally kind of, a loaded sort of like everyone's a loser type of power dynamic. Like, I'm a loser for having this customer service job, and you're a loser for trying to have sex with me.
Exactly.
While I'm working this customer service job.
That's a great point. My follow-up question is...
But he didn't seem like a loser, this bartender. I was finding myself attracted to this bartender as I was reading, but maybe that's just because I'm...
This one? No, I think he actually was... No, I think, like, he had that thing that a lot of, especially people in the service industry have, where it's like you're on... Like, you're like acting a little bit. You're just, you're working, and that's like your thing, you know.
Do you think if you were a destitute woman in their 40s, like you would also form these fantasies about like a charming bartender at a sports bar?
Yeah, I definitely would form the fantasies, but the one thing about me is I will never burst. Well, I guess never, but I don't burst the bubble.
Your own bubble, exactly.
I like
the mistake.
You want to be wanted. You don't necessarily want to find out, and that's like. That's key. And that's key also, which is what I thought was interesting, actually, to quickly go back to the text. Like, I thought that was actually quite interesting about this narrator. It was just like,
I took the step,
this feels similar, like to real life. Like, this is like a fantasy that you create. And then when she took the step, I was like, girl, no, like, don't burst the bubble. Like, you're gonna shatter your own illusion. And, you know, that's exactly what happens. So maybe I guess that was intentional, but maybe that is what it's about.
I feel like there is also just like, I don't know. Well, again, maybe it is to speak to the realism of it all. Like, she took the step to try to, you know, manifest the fantasy in physical reality, and it just panned out in a sort of boring way. And I guess that's probably exactly how it would happen in real life if me or you were in this position. But like, again, am I sitting here like reading this, like looking for representation for this specific experience? Not really, because
Not
this is
unless
kind
it's
of an
gonna
ordinary,
reveal
yeah,
something.
something.
That's a good point.
And even the last line, I just feel like I just wanted him in my mouth the same way. Like, I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a cop out. At that point, you might as well say, like, I was sitting outside the restaurant crying, imagining his cock
She
going,
should have
hitting
been
the back of my
sucking off the
throat.
old guy, imagining his cock.
Exactly. There you go.
Exactly.
And there's the compromise between our two perspectives to make this an interesting story.
I think this is.
I
we're
think you
onto
absolutely
something.
workshopped this successfully, and I'm sort of let down by the editorial prowess of the New Yorker staffers for not
Right.
suggesting that.
Right. Come on.
So
No, I have one more question for
yes,
you.
go ahead.
Sorry to
No, we've got time.
boot in here.
Yeah.
Given everything you just said, which I agree with, other than at work, where is the worst place to get asked out?
Other than at work?
Other than at work, where is the worst place to get asked out?
I mean, I feel like I just don't necessarily have the experience to answer this question because I've never been someone who's gotten asked out. Every sort of
it doesn't have to be a real, it could be hypothetical.
Yeah, hypothetical. Sorry, I have to just think for a second. Well,
No,
why don't you answer the question? What do you think?
What do I think? Worst place to get asked out? I didn't prepare an answer. Family reunion comes to mind. It's the old joke.
Would you have sex with a cousin, like a first cousin or second cousin? I feel like it's
second and above. It's
honestly speaking, I feel like if the circumstances were right, I would have sex with a first.
Do I know that they're my cousin?
Yes.
Or no, I mean, like no, and I know all my cousins, so I wouldn't. But if it was a distant,
I want to make
unknown
it very
cousin,
clear, I'm not referring to any of my actual first cousins. If somehow someone comes across this, which absolutely they won't, but I'm not speaking about literally about any first cousin I may or may not have. But see, if the circumstances were absolutely right, I think I would have sex with a first cousin.
If I did not know them, then I would. Yeah.
Even if I did, say we grew up together to some extent, I think I still would.
And I mean, certainly.
I would certainly draw the line at sibling, but I would absolutely step sibling and cousin, sure.
I think recently there's an article about this recently. It's 1 in 7,000 people or something
have sex with their step siblings?
A product of incest. And it's this really secretive thing that people don't want to talk about. And I thought that was so interesting because it is so shameful, but you had nothing to do with it, to be the child.
I don't think I would have a complex about that, would you?
I feel like it would be embarrassing to tell
siblings.
People.
Well, if they were siblings, then you'd be totally nerfed in the head, probably.
No, but I think that's the thing
cousins,
is that
I'd be ew, but I
not
wouldn't be
cousins. The study is on first degree relatives.
Oh.
Yeah, but so it's very secretive. But
how would you even be able to keep that as a secret? I guess not necessarily from your child, but
yeah,
I guess it'd be very easy for you to lie about your family past to me. For example, I for all I know, your parents.
It was behind a paywall,
brothers.
So I didn't,
yeah, exactly. Article, and that is the state of
my parents are today. Brothers. Just to go back to that, Slay. My two gay dads are actually brothers. Slay. No, I think, and I also think actually, did you know in Iceland? I don't know if this is a rumor. I actually think this is true. As of several years ago, I was told around 2016 there was an app that you could use
to make sure that
you'd be at the club trying to have a dance floor make out whatever, and you could check to see, and it would give you and then it would tell you whether or not you were related. My follow-up question is, would you rather know how distantly you're related with a stranger in this context on the dance floor or whatever, or just get a green a green means go, red stop? Would you rather know okay, this is my third cousin or my first cousin, or rather just a green, you're outside the range and
would the range be
related?
Third cousins is a-okay?
I feel like it would be second cousins because in Iceland's small. This is now total conjecture.
Very true.
So I wouldn't want to know if every Joe Schmo is my second cousin. I would just want to give me a green light or a red light.
I would personally be fine with knowing either way. I don't think I would really care.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe everyone does it in Iceland, though.
Fag, I don't know. I feel like this is kind of debauchery that someone who is homosexual. But you're dykey as well.
Yeah, but there's always there's always no matter what IUD, whatever the fuck you do, it's
Yeah,
But
like
what if
what
this
if?
is the
Yeah.
time that this random ass dude
And I'm like
knocks me up?
suddenly like pregnant with my first cousin's baby.
Right. And it's like, then I have a whole other set of choices and questions that I don't fucking want to
Do
deal
you
with.
think this story would
Then it becomes a family
particularly
affair.
benefit if it was an incest story, like a first or second cousin?
That's like so in right now too. I feel like
I
in
feel
fiction
it
to do all this.
is.
It's like,
I know.
why is it?
Well,
They
it's
were
like
doing in
the
the
alt
70s
fiction
too.
thing. You know, that
Yeah,
book I
it's so
read, Body
strange.
High by John Lindsay, where it's like, yeah, within the
Catherine
first 50
Dunn does it.
within the first
Yeah.
50 pages, he's already like raping his like incest sister. It's like, yeah, everybody wants
See,
to write an incest story.
We're talking about, when we talk about mood board, it's like not necessarily.
But I do
that.
feel like there is something about
There's
like
something mood.
yeah, like something that a 16-year-old girl who may or may not make a mood board based off of a story
true.
like would be drawn towards an incest narrative. Did
That's
you
the
ever feel
subversion aspect.
as a young girl, as a teen girl, did you ever feel drawn to incest?
No, I really don't think I did.
I mean,
that wasn't like a plot
incest
line.
does sort of loom large over the cultural consciousness, to use that phrase a second time this podcast, of like the gay man. All of our porn is like but I feel like that just runs the gamut across the board of like straight and gay porn. I mean, a lot of like gay porn is incest.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting.
Like it's always like uncle's secret or like daddy fun or like shit like that, you know? So I feel like incest is generally like something that, you know, is always in the back of a certain person's mind.
Right. I think it's
and that's
like,
why that's also why I don't find incest particularly engaging in fiction, because I'm like, whatever, girl. Yeah, it's like we're all thinking about it.
Funny you say that. I just the book that I had to read for my Victorian lit class, fucking Thomas Hardy, Jude the Obscure. The whole plot line is two cousins who are like grappling with their incestuous relationship.
Do you think
and like,
perhaps
this is really a tale as old as time
as a nation? The fact that we're not like having sex with our cousins.
Should we be having
like
sex
grappling?
with our cousins?
I
No, because that's giving kind of like Darwin, and then that slippery slope. So like,
perhaps out of our range as a podcast discussing ethics.
Right. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I think
find it
is a recurring
inherently
theme.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just because writers are naturally just like shit stirrers, which is interesting because the New Yorker perspective, I think, is particularly like in contrast to that. Like, I don't think anybody who gets a story in the New Yorker is necessarily a shit stirrer.
No.
And that's where the ones that end up blowing up because they're like odd little flashes of that.
Yeah.
Like
person.
Yeah, exactly. To
allude.
To invoke the great name. I think was a bit of a shit-stirring story.
Right.
And this certainly does not feel like shit-stirring. This story feels like an emotional conclusion that I feel like most kind of rationally minded New Yorker readers would also find themselves coming to if they were in this situation.
Right.
And I often find that disappointing in fiction. I would like to be surprised a little bit.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
Or like, I don't know, made uncomfortable a little bit.
I agree. There's something about the sort of
this seems like a capable woman who is doing the best that she can, you know?
Yeah, I think she's producing like good work.
Yeah, and
that's getting published.
In terms of the protagonist specifically. This is a story about like a capable woman who's emotionally mature.
Right.
And I'm like,
which maps that kind of coheres to
what we got from the interview as well.
Yes. And I would say,
and I'm like, you know, like a round of applause for the New Yorker readers being able to have this experience and identify with it, you know?
Yeah, it literally could never be me.
Yeah, it could never be me. Like,
yeah. I've made a scene at a bar or two.
As you should.
Our God-given right. Okay, well, are we...
No, I mean, we still have time.
Oh, slay. Let me see if I have any other questions for you.
I mean, do you have anything that you want to say about this piece?
Oh, the worst
about
place
life in general?
You didn't answer
the worst place to be asked out. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, the first thing I would say was like at a funeral. But
That's
I feel
what
like
I
that
was
would actually
thinking.
be like really hot. And I would actually like be totally into that. So to ask me at a funeral, I'd be like, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that actually would be kind of interesting.
I don't know. I feel like I would be like absolutely enthusiastic to be asked out anywhere. Or frankly, if anybody came up to me and approached me and asked me on a date, even if they were the ugliest, like nastiest looking, like grease ball, like I would absolutely be flattered and enthusiastic.
Slay.
Yeah,
absolutely slay. Would you say yes?
I would probably say yes, but then just flake at the end. because
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like I would be a little bit too anxious in that situation to kind of
Right.
voice
My
my
people-pleasing tendencies would also
exactly,
kind of take
and then it's like
over.
we can deal with this strategically when I have a phone between you and me.
Right.
That happened
Exactly.
to me one time. I was
You're the
thinking about this.
opposite of the narrator in this story,
I would
actually.
no, I very much am. But I was thinking about this recently. So this is when I was still like kind of really fat, and this is still when I was with my ex, I believe. But my ex and my best friend took me to like some like bullshit experimental theater production, and there
Slay.
was like this trans guy that I thought was particularly attractive. And when I think about it in retrospect, I think they were like a very early transition type of like female to male. But this is when I was pretending to be a top, when I was like so. The only reason why I was pretending to be a top is because I was really big at the time, and I aesthetically I felt like that was the only thing that made sense. I was sort of embarrassed to be a fat bottom. But at the end of this like experimental fiction show, I just sort of like very clumsily like clamored up to this like recently transitioned like trans man. I was like, hey, I think you're really cool and I want to hang out sometime. Can I get your number?
Slay.
And they gave me their number, but they obviously did not reply to any of my texts because I mean I was a total like grease ball. Like it was disgusting, and that sort of embarrassing experience sort of stuck with me. And I think it ended up working out in the end because I don't think I would have had a particularly like for either of us. I don't think that
Yeah.
situation would have, and they had the foresight to reject my advance
Yeah.
when I did not have that foresight. So, wherever
Sometimes it
you
is for the
are,
best.
blonde trans man, you know, but I want to say go fuck yourself because like they didn't reply to my text. Like go fuck yourself.
Right.
It was so
Yeah.
embarrassing too. I sent like multiple texts. I was like, hope you're getting these. Hope your show
Oh
goes well tonight. Yeah,
no.
it
It's
was pretty
okay. We've all
bad.
been we've all
And
been
you know what?
down
As
bad.
we
I've sent a
age, we
strand.
learn dignity. You
Yeah.
know.
It comes when you turn 25, first of all. I think anything below that, it's just a hard sell on a developing brain. Dignity.
I just every time I've tried to make an opening move, it like always kind of goes south. I just feel like I have like sort of a like threatening sort of like just like stay away sort of vibe where like if I try to ask
I
someone
think I have
out,
the same
yeah, it's
problem.
like there's like a sort of instinctual thing that most people have when they like understand sort of intuitively that they should like stay away from someone,
Right.
that they're like more trouble than it's worth. And I feel like I definitely ring those alarm bells for most people. Maybe not so much anymore, but back then certainly.
You know, I think I probably was doing the same and just less self-aware
When's the
of
last time you ever asked someone out?
I don't think I've ever asked someone
You
out
don't
in
think you've ever?
person. Not in
Yeah,
person,
absolutely not. Like
but over text. I've
but
asked
I
a
don't
few
think.
girls out
I
over
don't think. Yeah,
text.
I don't think that necessarily counts.
Yeah, I've never
Not because
asked
it's like
anybody
dykey or
out in
anything, but I mean like
but I've never
yeah.
like asked I've never
Ask
approached
for a
someone for their number.
number,
No. I've
never.
left my
And
number like on the receipt for like a hot bartender and
did it
it's not
happen?
paid
Yeah,
out. No, it's not.
absolutely. It
Except for
never
that one guy
does.
on Tinder, but it was
Yeah.
like we were already
Yeah.
and that was also
So overall, what would you? So we gave Neighbors. We both gave Neighbors by Zach Williams. Yeah. We both gave it a 4-star rating.
yeah.
I think I would give this a 3. I try to refrain from half-star ratings.
Oh, you're a
So,
half-star refrainer.
yeah, I like the kind of cut and dry. Like, let's make
Oh.
a decision here. You know what I mean? I think I would give this 3 stars. I think I would give this a firm 3 stars. I found myself rolling my eyes quite a bit.
I
Maybe
would
I'm a
actually
misogynist, and I sort of feel like a misogynist by like
No,
the
I don't think it's
willingness that I'm here to tear this
no.
apart with. But like, I don't know. I found myself sort of just like I was reading this. I was like, this is in the New Yorker. Like, truly, really, honestly, I feel like this is something we'd read in workshop.
Yeah.
Like, truly, I really do.
I would give it before I read the interview, I would give it 4 stars. And then after I read the interview, I would give it 3 stars.
Is that fair? Do you think?
Not entirely, but
I feel like they
it
gave
did
us
draw
this,
my
yes.
attention actually because I think this is the pitfall of explaining the story is that it drew my attention to things when I read it again that I
Yeah.
wasn't paying attention to the first time about.
And I feel like that is necessarily fair. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
if I were to read this again, my opinion would probably get
Right.
worse.
Because if I could go back and make the case solidly for my original read of this, I think I would feel differently. But unfortunately, after reading the interview, I am noticing.
Because are we left necessarily with anything like juicy, anything we want to take away and discuss and send, I would never send this story to someone and be like, oh, you have to read this.
No, this isn't mood board to me.
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think she's advertising a story collection coming out either. I think this is just something she submitted and it was right place, right time. This really makes me think, what the fuck is the New Yorker really looking for with their fiction? Come on, guys, come on.
Not sure what they want, but apparently it's not what we're offering.
Yeah, and it probably never will be. Okay, well, with that being said, thank you so much, for listening to our. I this is a more studious episode. I feel
exactly, and we had our mics maybe more figured out.
Yeah, and so hopefully you enjoyed. Yeah. I mean, either way, do the podcast things. If you are somehow listening for the first time, I mean, on YouTube, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. I mean, quite literally, my subscribers, all of you sort of dropped the ball, and I was really shocked that only one of you commented. Which, shout out to you. I hope you're doing well. I know you don't live in the Lake Forest area anymore. Hey, girl. Sorry, specifically to the one person who commented, because I recognize them. They're a long-time viewer. Just leave a comment, leave a thumbs up. If you're listening on any of the 2 podcast platforms, do that too. Follow us on Instagram. We're really trying with this.
We are.
And with that, I mean, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Woo, slay.